Marcus Johnson adjusted his tie for the third time that morning as he walked through the glass doors of Pinnacle Technologies. The 22-year-old recent graduate from Howard University had been dreaming of this moment for months. His first day as a software development intern at one of the most prestigious tech companies in Silicon Valley felt surreal. The lobby buzzed with activity as employees rushed past him, their confident strides and casual conversations making Marcus feel like an outsider looking in. He clutched his leather portfolio tighter, the one his grandmother had given him as a graduation gift. Inside were copies of his resume, letters of recommendation, and a notebook where he had jotted down everything he could find about Pinnacle Technologies. Marcus had grown up in a small town in Georgia where his mother worked 2 jobs to support him and his younger sister. Technology wasn't something that came naturally to his environment, but Marcus had always been fascinated by computers. He spent countless hours at the local library, teaching himself programming languages and dreaming of a career in tech. His high school guidance counselor had encouraged him to apply for scholarships, and through determination and hard work, he had earned a full ride to Howard University. Now, standing in this gleaming corporate headquarters, Marcus felt the weight of representing not just himself, but everyone who had believed in him. He was one of only 3 black interns in the entire program, something that both motivated and intimidated him. He had read about the lack of diversity in tech companies and was determined to prove that he belonged here. The security guard, a friendly man named Roberto, handed Marcus his temporary badge and pointed him toward the elevators. "Good luck on your first day, son," Roberto said with a warm smile. "You're going to do great things here." Marcus thanked him and made his way to the 15th floor where the software development team was located. The elevator ride felt endless, and he used the time to review his goals for the internship. He wanted to learn as much as possible, make meaningful connections, and hopefully secure a full-time offer upon graduation. More than anything, he wanted to show that his quiet, observant nature was actually a strength in the fast-paced world of technology. When the elevator doors opened, Marcus was greeted by Sarah Chen, the intern coordinator. She was a petite woman in her 30s, with an infectious energy that immediately put Marcus at ease. "You must be Marcus," she said, extending her hand. "We're so excited to have you join our team. I've heard wonderful things about your academic work." Sarah gave Marcus a tour of the office, introducing him to various team members along the way. The open floor plan was filled with standing desks, multiple monitors, and walls covered with whiteboards containing complex diagrams and code snippets. The casual atmosphere was a stark contrast to the formal business environment Marcus had imagined. "Don't worry about remembering everyone's names right away," Sarah said as they walked. "It takes time to get to know the team. The important thing is that everyone here is genuinely invested in helping interns succeed. We believe that fresh perspectives make us all better at what we do." Marcus was assigned to a cubicle near the window, with a view of the courtyard below. His supervisor, Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, was a senior software architect who had been with the company for over 8 years. She had specifically requested to mentor Marcus after reviewing his portfolio and academic transcripts. "I see a lot of potential in you," Dr. Reyes told Marcus during their first meeting. "Your approach to problem solving is methodical and thorough. Those are exactly the qualities we need for the project you'll be working on." The project involved developing a new accessibility feature for the company's flagship software product. Marcus would be working on improving screen reader compatibility and creating better navigation options for users with disabilities. It was meaningful work that aligned perfectly with Marcus's personal values and technical interests. Throughout his first week, Marcus threw himself into learning the codebase and understanding the project requirements. He stayed late most evenings not because he had to, but because he was genuinely excited about the work. His colleagues began to notice his dedication and attention to detail. During lunch breaks, Marcus often sat alone in the company cafeteria, reviewing his notes or reading technical documentation. He wasn't antisocial, but his reserved personality made it challenging to jump into conversations with his more outgoing colleagues. He preferred to listen and observe, taking in the dynamics of the workplace and learning from the discussions around him. One afternoon, while Marcus was debugging a particularly complex piece of code, he overheard 2 senior developers discussing the company's upcoming quarterly review. They mentioned that CEO Jonathan Mitchell would be visiting different departments to observe the teams in action. Marcus had only seen pictures of Mitchell in company newsletters and on the website. The CEO was known for his hands-on leadership style and his commitment to fostering innovation at every level of the organization. "He likes to walk around unannounced," one developer said. "Don't be surprised if you see him just standing nearby, watching how we work. He's not trying to catch people doing something wrong. He genuinely wants to understand what's happening on the ground level." Marcus made a mental note of this information. He had always been curious about leadership styles and was interested in observing how a successful CEO interacted with employees. His business courses in college had taught him about different management approaches, but seeing it in practice would be valuable learning experience. As the days passed, Marcus began to feel more comfortable in his role. His code reviews were consistently positive, and Dr. Reyes praised his ability to write clean, well-documented code. More importantly, Marcus was starting to see how his work would directly impact users who relied on accessibility features. This sense of purpose motivated him even more. The other interns in the program came from various backgrounds, but Marcus noticed that most of them were much more vocal about their achievements and opinions. During team meetings, they would readily share their ideas and ask questions. Marcus, on the other hand, preferred to absorb information first and contribute when he felt he had something meaningful to add. This approach sometimes made him feel invisible, but it also gave him unique insights into workplace dynamics. He noticed which communication styles were most effective, how decisions were made, and what kinds of contributions were most valued. His observational skills, honed during years of being one of the few students of color in many of his classes, served him well in this corporate environment. As Marcus settled into his routine at Pinnacle Technologies, he had no idea that a simple gesture in the coming weeks would change the trajectory of his career in ways he never could have imagined. His quiet presence and genuine nature were about to intersect with an opportunity that would test everything he thought he knew about making an impact in the corporate world. 3 weeks into his internship, Marcus had established a comfortable routine at Pinnacle Technologies. He arrived early each morning, usually before most of his colleagues, and used the quiet time to review his tasks for the day. The accessibility project was progressing well, and he had successfully implemented several features that improved navigation for users with visual impairments. Marcus had also begun to notice the subtle rhythms of office life. He knew that Dr. Martinez from the marketing team always arrived with a large coffee at exactly 8:47 a.m., and that the facilities manager, Janet, made her rounds checking supplies every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. These observations weren't intentional. They were simply part of his naturally observant personality. On a particularly busy Thursday morning, Marcus was deep in concentration, working on a complex algorithm that would optimize screen reader performance. The code was challenging, requiring him to balance efficiency with accessibility, and he had been wrestling with a specific function for the better part of an hour. The office around him hummed with typical mid-morning activity. Developers discussed project timelines over coffee. Product managers hurried between conference rooms with laptops tucked under their arms, and the gentle clicking of keyboards created a steady background rhythm. Marcus had learned to filter out most distractions, but he remained peripherally aware of his surroundings. Around 10:30 a.m., Marcus noticed a small commotion near the reception area. Through the glass partition that separated the development floor from the main corridor, he could see Sarah Chen, the intern coordinator, talking animatedly with someone he couldn't quite make out. Her gestures seemed more pronounced than usual, and she appeared to be explaining something with careful deliberation. Curiosity got the better of Marcus, and he glanced up from his monitor more frequently, trying to understand what was happening. After a few minutes, Sarah walked onto the development floor accompanied by a woman Marcus had never seen before. The visitor appeared to be in her 40s, professionally dressed in a navy blue suit, with short auburn hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. What immediately struck Marcus was how the woman's eyes moved constantly, taking in visual cues that others might miss. She watched Sarah's lips carefully when she spoke, and her own gestures were precise and deliberate. Marcus realized with sudden understanding that the visitor was deaf. Sarah was doing her best to communicate, but Marcus could see that the conversation was challenging for both of them. Sarah would speak slowly and then attempt basic hand gestures, while the visitor would nod politely and occasionally point to things or write notes on a small pad she carried. The visitor was apparently here for a tour of the development area, possibly as part of a potential business partnership or consulting arrangement. Marcus couldn't hear the specifics, but he could see Sarah's frustration growing as she struggled to effectively communicate the technical aspects of what the team was working on. Marcus found himself in a unique position. During his junior year at Howard, he had taken an American Sign Language course as an elective. What started as an easy way to fulfill a language requirement had turned into genuine interest and passion. He had continued studying ASL on his own, motivated partly by his work on accessibility features and partly by a deaf student in his computer science program who had become a study partner. While Marcus was far from fluent, he had developed a solid foundation in ASL and could handle basic to intermediate conversations. More importantly, he understood the nuances of communicating with deaf individuals, the importance of maintaining eye contact, the value of clear facial expressions, and the need for patience and respect in the interaction. As Marcus watched Sarah and the visitor struggle through their conversation, he felt a familiar internal conflict. His reserved nature made him hesitant to insert himself into situations, especially in a professional environment where he was still establishing his credibility. But his genuine desire to help, combined with his unique ability to potentially improve the situation, created a strong pull to act. For several minutes, Marcus remained frozen in indecision. He didn't want to overstep boundaries or appear presumptuous. What if his ASL skills weren't adequate for a business conversation? What if the visitor preferred to communicate in her own way? What if his intervention was seen as inappropriate by his colleagues? The internal debate continued as Marcus watched Sarah point to various workstations and attempt to explain the software development process through gestures and written notes. The visitor was clearly intelligent and engaged, asking questions through written responses and showing genuine interest in the technical aspects of the work. At one point, Sarah gestured toward Marcus's general area while explaining the accessibility project he was working on. Marcus saw an opportunity and a responsibility. This project was specifically designed to improve technology access for people with disabilities, and here was someone who could provide invaluable first-hand insight into the user experience. Marcus saved his work and stood up slowly, his heart racing with nervous energy. He had made similar decisions before, moments when his quiet observation revealed opportunities to help, even when it meant stepping outside his comfort zone. In college, he had tutored struggling students in programming, not because he was the most outgoing person in the class, but because he had the skills and saw the need. As he approached Sarah and the visitor, Marcus could feel the familiar rush of anxiety that came with social interaction. But underneath that nervousness was a stronger feeling, the sense that this was the right thing to do. His grandmother had always taught him that opportunities to help others were also opportunities to grow as a person. "Excuse me, Sarah," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I couldn't help but notice you're showing our visitor around. I know some sign language if that would be helpful." Sarah's face immediately brightened with relief. "Marcus, that would be wonderful. This is Dr. Amanda Foster from the National Accessibility Consortium. She's here to learn about our accessibility initiatives." Marcus turned to Dr. Foster and signed a simple greeting. "Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Marcus." His movements were careful but confident, and he maintained appropriate eye contact. Dr. Foster's entire demeanor changed instantly. Her professional smile became genuinely warm, and she signed back. "Thank you so much. It's wonderful to meet you. Your sign language is very good." Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction, not just from the successful communication, but from seeing the relief and appreciation in Dr. Foster's expression. What had been a stilted, challenging interaction suddenly became natural and flowing. "I'd be happy to help explain our accessibility project," Marcus signed and spoke simultaneously for Sarah's benefit. "I've been working specifically on screen reader integration and navigation improvements." Dr. Foster's eyes lit up with interest. "That's exactly what I wanted to learn about," she signed. "I work with organizations to improve their accessibility standards. This could be very valuable information for our recommendations." As Marcus began to explain the technical aspects of his work through sign language, he noticed something he hadn't expected. Other colleagues on the development floor had begun to take notice of the interaction. Some watched curiously from their desks, while others slowed their conversations to observe this unusual scene. Marcus was completely focused on his communication with Dr. Foster, explaining the challenges they had encountered in making the software more accessible and the solutions they had developed. Her questions were insightful and technical, pushing him to think more deeply about the practical implications of his work. What Marcus didn't realize was that Jonathan Mitchell, CEO of Pinnacle Technologies, had been conducting one of his informal walkthroughs of the office. He had been standing near the coffee station for the past several minutes, observing the interaction with growing interest. Mitchell's presence had gone unnoticed by Marcus, who was entirely focused on providing the best possible assistance to Dr. Foster. Jonathan Mitchell stood motionless near the coffee station, his morning routine temporarily forgotten as he watched the interaction unfolding 20 feet away. At 51, Mitchell had built Pinnacle Technologies from a small startup into an industry leader through his keen ability to recognize talent and innovation in unexpected places. His informal office walkthroughs weren't just about staying connected with employees. They were strategic observations that often revealed insights about his company's culture and potential. What captured Mitchell's attention wasn't just Marcus's sign language skills, though those were impressive. It was the young intern's complete transformation during the interaction. The reserved, quiet demeanor that Mitchell had noticed in previous glimpses around the office had given way to confident, engaged communication. Marcus was explaining complex technical concepts with clarity and passion, his hands moving fluidly between sign language and gestures that helped illustrate his points. Mitchell had been dealing with accessibility compliance issues for months. The company had received feedback from disability advocacy groups about the need for better inclusive design, and several government contracts required enhanced accessibility features. Despite hiring consultants and conducting expensive audits, progress had been slower than he wanted. Now he was watching an intern having a sophisticated technical discussion about accessibility solutions with what appeared to be an expert in the field. Dr. Foster was clearly impressed with Marcus's knowledge and the practical applications he described. She asked detailed questions about implementation challenges, user testing methodologies, and scalability concerns. Marcus responded thoughtfully, sometimes pausing to consider his answer before signing his response. When he wasn't sure about a technical detail, he was honest about the limitations of his knowledge and offered to connect her with Dr. Reyes for more advanced discussions. The most challenging aspect, Marcus signed, has been balancing comprehensive accessibility with system performance. We want the features to be robust enough for users who depend on them, but integrated seamlessly enough that they don't impact the experience for other users. Dr. Foster nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need to see more of in the industry. Too often, accessibility is treated as an afterthought or a separate feature set. Your approach of integrated design is much more effective. Mitchell found himself impressed not just by the technical discussion, but by Marcus's professional demeanor. The young man had stepped forward to help without being asked, had engaged respectfully with a visitor, and was representing the company exceptionally well. These were leadership qualities that couldn't be taught in training programs. They came from character and genuine caring about others. As the conversation continued, other employees began to take more obvious notice. Dr. Reyes approached the group, introduced herself to Dr. Foster, and joined the discussion. Sarah Chen looked visibly relieved and grateful for Marcus's intervention. Several developers had slowed their work to watch the interaction, some with curiosity and others with obvious admiration for Marcus's unexpected skills. Marcus remained focused on facilitating communication between Dr. Foster and his colleagues, translating questions and responses as needed. He was comfortable serving as the bridge between the hearing and deaf worlds, something that required not just language skills but cultural sensitivity and patience. Mitchell noticed how Marcus adapted his communication style for different people. When Dr. Reyes joined the conversation with highly technical terminology, Marcus was able to translate complex engineering concepts into sign language. When Sarah had questions about scheduling follow-up meetings, Marcus shifted to more practical administrative language. This flexibility demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence that Mitchell rarely saw in employees at any level, let alone interns. The discussion had evolved into a comprehensive review of Pinnacle's accessibility initiatives. Dr. Foster was taking detailed notes, and it became clear that this impromptu meeting was turning into a valuable business conversation. She represented a consortium that could potentially endorse Pinnacle's software for use by organizations serving the deaf and hard of hearing community, a market segment that could represent millions in additional revenue. "I'm very impressed with what you've accomplished," Dr. Foster signed to Marcus. "The technical approach is sound, but more importantly, it's clear that the development was driven by genuine understanding of user needs. That's uncommon in the industry." Marcus translated her comments for the growing group of colleagues, including Dr. Foster's suggestion that Pinnacle could serve as a model for other tech companies. Mitchell watched as Marcus's quiet pride in his work became evident, not in a boastful way, but in the careful attention he paid to accurately conveying Dr. Foster's praise. Sarah Chen seized the opportunity to extend the visit. "Dr. Foster, would you be interested in seeing some of our other accessibility features? Marcus has been involved in several projects that might interest your organization." Marcus looked momentarily uncertain, glancing toward his workstation where his morning's code remained unfinished. But Dr. Foster's enthusiasm was evident, and Dr. Reyes nodded encouragingly. "Your current task can wait," Dr. Reyes said. "This is exactly the kind of real-world application we want to see from our accessibility work." As the group moved toward the demonstration area, Mitchell made a decision. Instead of continuing his walkthrough as planned, he would observe this impromptu showcase. He maintained his distance, positioning himself where he could watch and listen without interrupting the flow of the presentation. Marcus guided Dr. Foster through several software features, explaining the technical implementation while demonstrating practical applications. He had clearly thought deeply about the user experience from the perspective of people with disabilities. His explanations went beyond the mechanics of the code to address real-world usage scenarios and potential challenges. "One thing we discovered during testing," Marcus signed, "is that users often employ assistive technologies in ways we didn't initially expect. So we built in customization options that allow people to adapt the interface to their specific needs and preferences." This insight impressed Mitchell considerably. Most developers focused on technical specifications and performance metrics. Marcus was thinking like a product manager, considering user behavior and market applications. This kind of strategic thinking usually took years to develop. Yet here was a first-year intern demonstrating sophisticated understanding of both technical and business considerations. Dr. Foster asked about the testing process, and Marcus honestly explained the limitations of their current approach. "We've done extensive testing with simulation software and some volunteer users from the local deaf community. But we know that broader user testing would help us identify issues we might have missed." Mitchell made a mental note about this gap. If Dr. Foster's organization could provide access to a larger testing community, it could significantly improve Pinnacle's accessibility offerings while building valuable relationships with disability advocacy groups. The demonstration continued for another 30 minutes, with Dr. Foster asking increasingly detailed questions about implementation strategies, scalability concerns, and integration with other assistive technologies. Marcus answered what he could and appropriately deferred to Dr. Reyes for questions beyond his expertise. Throughout the interaction, Mitchell observed not just Marcus's technical knowledge but his interpersonal skills. He was patient when Dr. Foster needed clarification, respectful when she offered suggestions for improvement, and collaborative when discussing potential enhancements. These were exactly the qualities Mitchell looked for in employees he promoted to leadership positions. As the demonstration concluded, Dr. Foster expressed genuine enthusiasm for Pinnacle's accessibility work and requested materials to share with her consortium. She also asked if Marcus would be available for follow-up questions as her organization prepared their assessment report. "I'd be happy to help however I can," Marcus signed. "This kind of feedback is invaluable for improving our work." Mitchell watched as business cards were exchanged and follow-up meetings scheduled. What had started as a routine office visit had become a significant business development opportunity, all because a quiet intern had noticed someone who needed help and had the skills and courage to offer assistance. As Dr. Foster prepared to leave, she turned to Marcus with a final comment that Mitchell was able to observe clearly. "Your company is fortunate to have someone who understands that technology should serve everyone. I hope they recognize the value of what you bring to their team." After Dr. Foster left the building, Marcus returned to his workstation with a mix of emotions swirling through his mind. The interaction had been professionally rewarding, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had somehow stepped outside his designated role as an intern. His hands were still slightly trembling from the adrenaline of the extended conversation, and he found it difficult to refocus on the code that had been occupying his attention all morning. Dr. Reyes approached his desk shortly after he sat down, her expression warm with approval. "Marcus, that was exceptional work today. Dr. Foster was genuinely impressed with your knowledge and communication skills. I want you to know that your ability to bridge that communication gap turned what could have been a frustrating visit into a productive business meeting." Marcus looked up from his keyboard, still processing the events of the past hour. "I just wanted to help," he said simply. "It seemed like the right thing to do." "That's exactly why it was so impressive," Dr. Reyes replied. "You saw a need and responded without being asked. That kind of initiative is rare, especially among people who are just starting their careers." As word of the morning's events spread through the development team, Marcus found himself receiving congratulations and questions from colleagues who had previously barely acknowledged his presence. The attention made him uncomfortable. He much preferred working quietly in the background, but he appreciated that his coworkers seemed to see him differently now. Sarah Chen stopped by later that afternoon with more specific feedback. "Marcus, I owe you a huge thank you. I was completely out of my depth trying to communicate with Dr. Foster, and you saved what could have been an embarrassing situation for the company. I'm going to make sure this gets mentioned in your intern evaluation." Marcus thanked her politely, but privately wondered if the attention was worth it. He had always believed that good work would speak for itself, and the sudden visibility felt overwhelming. Part of him worried that expectations would now be higher, and that he might not be able to live up to the impression he had apparently made. Unknown to Marcus, Jonathan Mitchell had spent the remainder of his morning thinking about what he had observed. Upon returning to his office, Mitchell had immediately looked up Marcus's intern file, reviewing his academic records, application materials, and supervisor evaluations. What he found confirmed his initial impression. Here was someone with exceptional potential who had been flying under the radar. Mitchell's assistant, Patricia, was accustomed to her boss's sudden interest in particular employees. Over the years, she had seen him identify and promote numerous individuals who might otherwise have been overlooked. "Should I schedule a meeting with the intern?" she asked after Mitchell explained what he had witnessed. "Not yet," Mitchell replied thoughtfully. "I want to observe him a bit more first. Sometimes people perform differently when they know they're being watched. What impressed me most was how natural and genuine his response was. That's not something you can manufacture." Mitchell decided to adjust his office walkthrough schedule to include more frequent visits to the development floor. He wanted to see how Marcus handled normal workday situations, how he interacted with colleagues, and whether the leadership qualities he had displayed were consistent or just a one-time response to unusual circumstances. Meanwhile, Marcus threw himself back into his accessibility project with renewed focus. The conversation with Dr. Foster had given him several new ideas for improvement, and he was eager to implement them before his enthusiasm waned. He stayed late that evening, working on enhancements that addressed some of the concerns she had raised. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office to find an email from Dr. Foster waiting in his inbox. She had sent a detailed list of questions about implementation strategies and had copied Dr. Reyes on the message. More significantly, she had forwarded Marcus's contact information to several other organizations in her network who were interested in learning about Pinnacle's accessibility initiatives. "You've become our unofficial accessibility ambassador," Dr. Reyes joked when she saw the email. "This could lead to some significant opportunities for the company." Marcus felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. He was thrilled that his work was being recognized by industry experts, but worried about his ability to handle the increased responsibility. His imposter syndrome, which had been manageable during his first few weeks, suddenly felt more intense. During his lunch break, Marcus called his mother to share the news about his expanding role in the accessibility project. She listened with pride as he described the previous day's events, but she also picked up on his underlying nervousness. "Baby, you've always been the kind of person who notices what others need," she said in her gentle Georgia accent. "That's not something they taught you in school. That's who you are. Don't let fear of success stop you from doing what comes naturally." Her words resonated with Marcus throughout the afternoon. He realized that his hesitation wasn't really about technical competence. He knew he was capable of handling the work. His real fear was about visibility and the responsibilities that came with recognition. That afternoon, Mitchell made another unplanned visit to the development floor. This time, he observed Marcus during normal working hours, watching how he approached routine tasks and interacted with colleagues. What he saw reinforced his positive impression from the previous day. Marcus was methodical in his work, taking time to write clean, well-documented code that would be easy for others to maintain. When a fellow intern asked for help with a challenging problem, Marcus stopped his own work to provide assistance, explaining concepts clearly and patiently. Most importantly, he continued to demonstrate the same observational skills that had allowed him to identify Dr. Foster's communication needs. Mitchell noticed that Marcus had a habit of quietly testing his code from multiple angles before submitting it for review. While other interns often rushed to complete assignments, Marcus took extra time to ensure quality. This attention to detail had resulted in consistently clean code reviews and fewer bugs in the final product. During a brief team meeting that Mitchell observed from a distance, Marcus contributed thoughtfully to a discussion about user interface design. His suggestions were practical and well-reasoned, focusing on how changes would impact the actual user experience rather than just technical elegance. What struck Mitchell most was that Marcus seemed completely unaware of the positive impression he was making. There was no sense of performance or attempt to stand out. He was simply doing good work with genuine care for quality and user impact. As the week progressed, more opportunities related to accessibility consulting began to emerge. Two companies that had heard about Pinnacle's work through Dr. Foster's network requested information about their accessibility features. A government agency inquired about potential partnerships for a project aimed at improving technology access for disabled veterans. Dr. Reyes began including Marcus in higher-level discussions about these opportunities, recognizing that his unique combination of technical skills and communication abilities made him valuable for client interactions. Marcus found himself participating in conference calls with potential clients, translating technical capabilities into practical applications. The increased responsibility was challenging, but rewarding. Marcus discovered that he enjoyed the strategic aspects of the work as much as the technical implementation. He began to see how individual coding decisions could have broader business and social implications. Mitchell continued his discreet observations, watching how Marcus handled the growing demands on his time and attention. He was particularly interested in seeing whether success would change Marcus's fundamental approach to work and relationships with colleagues. What he observed was consistency. Marcus remained helpful to fellow interns, continued to produce high-quality work, and maintained his respectful professional demeanor even as his profile within the company grew. If anything, the additional responsibility seemed to energize him rather than overwhelm him. By the end of the week, Mitchell had made a decision. Marcus Johnson was exactly the kind of employee Pinnacle Technologies needed more of. Someone who combined technical competence with genuine caring for others, who could see opportunities that others missed, and who approached challenges with both humility and confidence. The question now was how to nurture this potential without overwhelming a young professional who was still learning to navigate the corporate world. Mitchell knew that the next few weeks would be crucial in determining whether Marcus would thrive under increased attention or retreat back into the safety of quiet anonymity. 2 weeks after the encounter with Dr. Foster, Marcus had settled into a new rhythm that balanced his original accessibility project with the growing demands of consulting opportunities. His workspace had evolved to include a second monitor and a small whiteboard where he sketched out user interface concepts. The changes were subtle but significant, symbols of his expanding role within the company. Jonathan Mitchell had been carefully observing Marcus's adaptation to increased responsibilities. What impressed him most was how the young intern managed to maintain the quality of his original work while taking on additional challenges. Marcus hadn't allowed success to distract him from the fundamentals that had earned him recognition in the first place. On a particularly busy Tuesday morning, Mitchell decided it was time for a more direct approach. Instead of observing from a distance, he would engage Marcus in a casual conversation to better understand his perspective on the work and his future goals. However, Mitchell's plans were interrupted by an unexpected crisis that would test Marcus's capabilities in ways no one could have anticipated. The crisis began with a phone call to Sarah Chen at 9:15. The caller was Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the director of the Regional Center for Independent Living, an organization that provided services and advocacy for people with disabilities. Dr. Hendricks was calling in a state of near panic. "We have a major presentation to the state legislature this afternoon," Dr. Hendricks explained, her voice tight with stress. "Our IT consultant was supposed to ensure that all our presentation materials would be accessible to the 3 deaf legislators who will be attending. He just called to say he can't make it due to a family emergency, and we have no backup plan." The presentation was crucial for the organization's funding request, which would impact services for thousands of disabled individuals across the region. Without proper accessibility accommodations, the deaf legislators would be unable to fully participate in the discussion, potentially affecting their votes on the funding bill. Sarah immediately thought of Marcus, but she hesitated to volunteer an intern for such a high-stakes situation. The responsibility seemed beyond what should be expected of someone still learning the corporate environment. However, after Dr. Hendricks described the potential consequences of a failed presentation, Sarah made a decision that would prove pivotal for everyone involved. "We might have someone who could help," Sarah said carefully. "Let me make some calls and get back to you within the hour." After ending the call, Sarah sought out Dr. Reyes to discuss the situation. They agreed that Marcus had the technical skills and communication abilities to potentially help, but the pressure and visibility of the situation were concerning. This wasn't a routine workplace interaction. It was a high-pressure environment with significant consequences for failure. When they approached Marcus with the request, his initial reaction was a mixture of excitement and terror. The technical challenges didn't worry him. Creating accessible presentation materials and providing real-time translation support were well within his capabilities. What concerned him was the political and social importance of the event. Legislators would be making decisions that affected real people's lives, and his role in facilitating that communication felt enormous. "I want to help," Marcus said after considering the request for several minutes, "but I need to be honest about my limitations. My sign language is good, but it's not at the level of a professional interpreter, and I've never worked in a political environment before." Dr. Reyes appreciated his honesty. "We're not asking you to replace a professional interpreter." Dr. Hendricks said they have a certified ASL interpreter for the formal presentation. What they need is technical support to make the visual materials accessible and backup communication assistance if needed. Marcus agreed to take on the challenge, but only after confirming that he could work with Dr. Hendricks's team to ensure everything was properly prepared. He spent the remainder of the morning on conference calls with the organization, reviewing their presentation materials and identifying accessibility issues that needed to be addressed. The problems were more extensive than anyone had anticipated. The presentation included complex charts and graphs that would be difficult for screen readers to interpret, videos without closed captioning, and interactive elements that weren't compatible with assistive technologies. Marcus realized he would need to essentially rebuild significant portions of the presentation in the few hours available. Jonathan Mitchell learned about the situation when Sarah briefed him on Marcus's absence from regular duties. Instead of expressing concern about an intern taking on such responsibility, Mitchell was intrigued by the leadership opportunity this represented. He decided to visit the conference room where Marcus was working, ostensibly to offer company support, but primarily to observe how Marcus handled extreme pressure. When Mitchell arrived at the conference room, he found Marcus surrounded by laptops, tablets, and printed materials, working with intense focus to rebuild the presentation. Dr. Hendricks had driven from the regional center to work directly with Marcus, and Mitchell could overhear their collaboration through the glass walls. "The key thing," Marcus was explaining to Dr. Hendricks, "is that we need to convey the same information through multiple channels. The visual charts are powerful, but we need audio descriptions that capture the essential data points, and we need text alternatives that screen readers can process effectively." Dr. Hendricks nodded. impressed by Marcus's systematic approach to the accessibility challenges. I have to admit I was skeptical when Sarah suggested an intern could handle this. But you clearly understand both the technical requirements and the real-world implications better than our previous consultant. Mitchell watched as Marcus managed multiple complex tasks simultaneously. He was rebuilding PowerPoint slides to include proper alt text descriptions, converting data charts into accessible formats, and coordinating with Dr. Hendricks on the political messaging that needed to be preserved throughout the accessibility modifications. What struck Mitchell most was Marcus's ability to ask the right questions. Instead of simply making technical changes, he sought to understand the purpose behind each element of the presentation. When he encountered a particularly complex graph showing funding trends over 5 years, Marcus didn't just add a text description. He worked with Dr. Hendricks to identify the 3 most important data points that legislators needed to understand, then created multiple ways to communicate those insights. The challenge with accessibility, Marcus explained as he worked, isn't just making information available. It's making sure the most important messages come through clearly, regardless of how someone accesses the content. As the morning progressed, Marcus's confidence grew noticeably. The technical problems were challenging but solvable, and his collaboration with Dr. Hendricks was producing results that exceeded both of their initial expectations. More importantly, Marcus was beginning to see how his technical skills could have direct social impact. Around noon, Dr. Hendricks received a call that added another layer of complexity to the situation. One of the deaf legislators had requested that the presentation materials be available in American Sign Language video format as well as text, allowing for review before the afternoon session. "That's not something we can produce on short notice," Dr. Hendricks said, looking defeated. "Professional ASL video production takes days or weeks, not hours." Marcus considered the problem for several minutes before proposing a solution that surprised everyone in the room. "What if we created a simplified video where I sign the key points directly to camera? It wouldn't be as polished as professional production, but it would provide the content in ASL format." The suggestion was ambitious and risky. Marcus would be creating content that would be viewed by state legislators, and any mistakes in his signing could potentially misrepresent important information. However, given the time constraints and the importance of the presentation, it seemed like the best available option. Mitchell, who had been observing quietly from outside the conference room, made a decision to directly support the effort. He knocked on the door and introduced himself to Dr. Hendricks, explaining that Pinnacle Technologies wanted to provide whatever resources were necessary to ensure the presentation's success. "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Hendricks said, clearly surprised to meet the CEO, "your intern has been extraordinary. I've worked with accessibility consultants who charged thousands of dollars and delivered less comprehensive solutions than what Marcus has created this morning." Mitchell turned to Marcus, who was clearly nervous about the sudden executive attention. "I understand you're considering creating ASL video content. That's a significant responsibility. Are you confident in your ability to accurately convey the information?" Marcus took a moment to consider his response carefully. "My ASL skills are solid for the content we're discussing, and I've been working closely with Dr. Hendricks to understand the key messages. I think I can create something that would be helpful, but I want to be transparent about my limitations. I'm not a certified interpreter, and this would be my first time creating content for such an important audience." Mitchell appreciated the honest assessment. "What would you need to feel more confident about the quality of the final product?" "Ideally, I'd like to have Dr. Foster review the videos before they're submitted," Marcus replied. "She could identify any issues with my signing or suggest improvements to make the content more effective." Within 30 minutes, Mitchell had arranged for Dr. Foster to join them via video conference to review Marcus's work. Her presence added a layer of professional validation that made everyone more comfortable with the unconventional solution they were developing. As Marcus began recording the ASL videos, Dr. Foster provided real-time feedback on his signing clarity and suggested improvements to his presentation style. The collaboration was remarkably effective, with Marcus's technical knowledge, Dr. Hendricks's political expertise, and Dr. Foster's accessibility insights combining to create comprehensive materials. By 2 p.m., they had produced a complete accessibility package that included modified presentation slides, detailed audio descriptions, text alternatives for all visual content, and ASL video summaries of the key points. The materials exceeded the original requirements and provided multiple ways for legislators to access and understand the information. Dr. Hendricks was effusive in her gratitude as she prepared to leave for the state capitol. "Marcus, I cannot thank you enough. You've not only solved our immediate crisis, you've created materials that are better than what we originally planned. This could make a real difference in the lives of thousands of people." As Dr. Hendricks departed, Mitchell found himself alone with Marcus for the first time since the morning's crisis began. The young intern was clearly exhausted but also energized by the successful completion of the challenge. "That was impressive work," Mitchell said simply. "How do you feel about how everything went?" Marcus considered the question thoughtfully. It was scary and exciting at the same time. "I kept thinking about all the people who would be affected by the funding decision, and that motivated me to do the best work I could. I also realized that I really enjoy this kind of challenge, combining technical skills with social impact." Mitchell nodded, recognizing that Marcus had just articulated the kind of purpose-driven motivation that characterized the company's most successful employees. "You demonstrated some remarkable leadership abilities today. Not just technical skills, but the ability to manage complex projects under pressure and collaborate effectively with external stakeholders." As they talked, Mitchell began to understand that Marcus's potential extended far beyond his current role as an intern. The morning's events had revealed someone capable of handling significant responsibility, thinking strategically about complex problems, and maintaining composure under pressure. The question now was how to nurture this potential without overwhelming someone who was still developing his professional identity and confidence. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same conference room where he had first worked on Dr. Hendricks' emergency presentation, but everything about the scene had changed. The room now served as the headquarters for Pinnacle's Accessible Technology Solutions division, which had grown from Marcus's solo project into a team of 12 specialists working on accessibility consulting, inclusive design, and assistive technology development. The transformation had been remarkable by any measure. What started with a simple wave hello to a deaf visitor had evolved into a thriving business unit that was generating significant revenue while creating meaningful social impact. Marcus had successfully led the division through its startup phase, establishing partnerships with disability advocacy organizations, government agencies, and corporations seeking to improve their accessibility compliance. The morning meeting that Marcus was preparing to lead included representatives from 3 potential new clients, including a major healthcare system that wanted to make their patient portal accessible to users with visual impairments. Dr. Foster, who had become an unofficial advisor to the division, would be joining by video conference to provide expert input on the proposed solutions. As Marcus reviewed his presentation materials, he reflected on how much had changed in his approach to leadership and communication. The reserved intern who had once hesitated to speak up in meetings had developed into a confident presenter who could articulate complex technical concepts to diverse audiences. More importantly, he had learned to leverage his natural, observational skills and empathetic nature as leadership strengths, rather than viewing them as limitations. The team that Marcus had built reflected his values and approach to inclusive design. Rather than hiring only technical specialists, he had recruited individuals with diverse backgrounds and perspectives, including several team members who had personal experience with disabilities. This approach had resulted in better products and stronger client relationships, as the team could understand user needs from both technical and experiential perspectives. Dr. Reyes, who had transitioned from Marcus's supervisor to his technical advisor and closest collaborator, entered the conference room with a smile that mixed pride and amazement. "Are you ready for the big presentation?" she asked, referring to the afternoon session where Marcus would be presenting the division's first-year results to Pinnacle's board of directors. "As ready as I can be," Marcus replied, though his confidence was genuine rather than forced. The nervous energy he felt was the productive kind that came from preparing for an important challenge rather than the anxiety that had once paralyzed him in high-pressure situations. The morning client meetings went exceptionally well, with 2 of the 3 organizations committing to major accessibility consulting contracts. The healthcare systems project would be particularly meaningful, as it would directly impact the ability of disabled patients to manage their medical care independently. During the lunch break, Marcus received a text message from his mother. Saw the article about your company in the business section of the Atlanta paper. Your grandmother would be so proud. We all are. The article she referenced was part of a growing pattern of recognition for the Accessible Technology Solutions division. Industry publications had begun featuring Marcus's work as an example of how young professionals could drive innovation while creating social impact. He had been invited to speak at several conferences and had been recognized by disability rights organizations for his contributions to assistive technology development. The recognition was gratifying, but what meant most to Marcus was the feedback he received from actual users of the technologies his team developed. Letters from individuals who could now access services that had previously been unavailable to them. Emails from parents whose disabled children could participate more fully in educational activities, and testimonials from organizations that had been able to expand their outreach to previously underserved communities. As the afternoon board presentation approached, Marcus felt a familiar mixture of excitement and responsibility. Jonathan Mitchell had scheduled him to present directly to the board of directors, an unusual honor for someone who had been with the company for less than a year. The presentation would determine the future funding and expansion plans for the division. 20 minutes before the presentation, Mitchell stopped by the conference room to check on Marcus's preparation. Their relationship had evolved from CEO and intern to mentor and protege, with Mitchell providing strategic guidance while allowing Marcus the autonomy to develop his own leadership style. "How are you feeling about the presentation?" Mitchell asked, noting the careful organization of Marcus's materials and the confident set of his shoulders. "Nervous but excited," Marcus replied honestly. "I keep thinking about how surreal this is. 8 months ago, I was hoping to get through my internship without embarrassing myself. And now I'm presenting to the board about a division I built from nothing." Mitchell nodded, remembering his own early career moments when opportunity and preparation had intersected in unexpected ways. "You've earned this opportunity through consistently exceptional work. The board members have already seen the financial results and client feedback. What they want to understand today is your vision for the future and your confidence in the team's ability to execute that vision." As they talked, Marcus realized that his perspective on leadership had fundamentally shifted over the past months. Instead of viewing leadership as something that required natural charisma or aggressive self-promotion, he had learned that authentic leadership could emerge from genuine care for others, careful attention to detail,
and the ability to see opportunities that others missed. The board presentation itself was a defining moment in Marcus's professional development.
He presented the division's accomplishments with quiet confidence, demonstrated the impact of their work through compelling user testimonials, and outlined an ambitious but realistic expansion plan that would triple the team's size over the next 2 years. The board members asked probing questions about market size, competitive positioning, and scalability challenges. Marcus answered each question thoughtfully, acknowledging uncertainties while demonstrating deep understanding of both the technical and business aspects of accessible technology development. When board member Patricia Williams asked about the long-term social impact goals of the division, Marcus's response revealed the passion that had driven his success. "Our goal isn't just to help companies comply with accessibility regulations. We want to fundamentally change how technology is designed and implemented so that inclusion becomes the default rather than an afterthought. Every product we create should be usable by the widest possible range of people from the very beginning." The presentation concluded with unanimous board approval for the expansion plan, along with additional funding for research and development initiatives. As the board members filed out of the conference room, several stopped to personally congratulate Marcus on his work and to express their confidence in his leadership abilities. Mitchell remained behind as the room emptied, his expression reflecting both satisfaction and anticipation for what Marcus would accomplish in the years ahead. "That was an outstanding presentation," he said. "You've built something remarkable here, and more importantly, you've developed into the kind of leader that Pinnacle needs for its future growth." As Marcus packed up his presentation materials, he thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A simple decision to help a visitor who needed assistance had revealed capabilities he didn't know he possessed and had opened doors to opportunities he had never imagined possible. Later that evening, as Marcus walked through the office that had become his professional home, he paused at the window where he had first noticed Dr. Foster struggling to communicate with Sarah Chen. The memory of that moment served as a reminder that leadership opportunities often presented themselves in unexpected ways, and that the willingness to step forward and help others could transform not just individual careers, but entire organizations and communities. Marcus Johnson had discovered that his quiet nature, observational skills, and genuine care for others weren't limitations to overcome in the corporate world. They were exactly the qualities that had enabled him to build something meaningful and lasting. The reserved intern who had once worried about fitting in had become a leader who was helping to reshape how technology could serve everyone in society. As he turned off the lights and headed home, Marcus was already thinking about the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. There were new technologies to develop, new partnerships to build, and new ways to ensure that innovation truly served all members of society. The young man who had once waved hello to a deaf visitor had found his calling in making sure that gesture of inclusion was reflected in everything his team created. The following morning, Marcus arrived at the office to find an email from Dr. Hendricks waiting in his inbox. The subject line read, "Presentation success, thank you," and the message contained news that exceeded everyone's expectations. The accessibility accommodations had not only enabled full participation by the deaf legislators, but had impressed the entire legislative committee with their comprehensiveness and quality. More significantly, the funding bill had passed by a wider margin than anyone had anticipated. Two legislators who had been undecided had specifically mentioned being influenced by the thoroughness of the accessibility accommodations, viewing them as evidence of the organization's commitment to serving all constituents effectively. The legislators were so impressed with the presentation materials that they've requested we share our accessibility protocols with other organizations seeking state funding, Dr. Hendricks wrote. You've not only helped us secure our funding, you've potentially influenced how accessibility is approached across the entire state funding process. Marcus read the email twice, struggling to process the magnitude of the impact his work had achieved. What had started as an emergency technical support request had evolved into something with statewide implications for disability rights and accommodation standards. Dr. Reyes stopped by his desk shortly after he finished reading the email. "I heard about yesterday's success," she said with a proud smile. "Dr. Hendricks called me this morning to discuss potential ongoing collaboration. She's interested in having Pinnacle Technologies serve as a technical consultant for their future accessibility needs." The news represented a significant business opportunity for the company, but more importantly for Marcus, it validated his growing sense that his work could have meaningful social impact beyond corporate profits. He had found a way to align his technical skills with his personal values in a manner that created value for everyone involved. Later that morning, Marcus received an unexpected request to attend a meeting in Jonathan Mitchell's office. The summons made him nervous. In his experience, meetings with executives rarely meant good news for low-level employees. He spent the elevator ride to the executive floor reviewing his recent work, trying to identify any mistakes that might have prompted the meeting. Mitchell's office was more modest than Marcus had expected, with bookshelves filled with technical manuals and industry publications, rather than the imposing corporate artwork he had imagined. Mitchell gestured for Marcus to take a seat in one of the comfortable chairs near the window, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a conversation than a formal business meeting. "I wanted to talk with you about yesterday's presentation project," Mitchell began. "But first I need to make something clear. I've been observing your work for the past few weeks not because you were in trouble, but because I was impressed by what I saw during your interaction with Dr. Foster." Marcus felt a mix of surprise and embarrassment. He had no idea his work was being monitored at the executive level, and the knowledge made him reassess several recent interactions and decisions. "I hope you don't mind the observation," Mitchell continued, reading Marcus's expression correctly. "It's something I do regularly to identify employees who demonstrate exceptional potential. What I've seen from you goes well beyond technical competence. You've shown leadership qualities that typically take years to develop." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Marcus had experienced in his brief professional career. Mitchell asked thoughtful questions about Marcus's background, his motivations for choosing technology as a career, and his thoughts about the relationship between technical innovation and social responsibility. Marcus found himself opening up about his journey from a small Georgia town to Silicon Valley, his experiences as one of the few black students in his computer science program, and his growing interest in using technology to address social challenges. Mitchell listened attentively, asking follow-up questions that demonstrated genuine interest in understanding Marcus's perspective. Yesterday's crisis revealed something important about how you approach challenges, Mitchell said after Marcus finished describing his background. Most people, when faced with an urgent problem outside their normal responsibilities, either decline to help or focus solely on the technical aspects. You saw the broader implications, the impact on real people's lives, and that motivated you to deliver exceptional work under pressure. Mitchell went on to explain that Pinnacle Technologies was in the process of expanding their accessibility and social impact initiatives. The success of Marcus's work with Dr. Foster and Dr. Hendricks had accelerated planning for a new division focused on accessibility consulting and inclusive design services. I'd like you to consider leading the development of this new initiative, Mitchell said, causing Marcus to nearly drop his water glass in surprise. It would mean transitioning from an intern role to a full-time position with significant responsibilities for building a new area of business. The offer was overwhelming in its scope and implications. Marcus would be responsible for developing business strategies, managing client relationships, and building a team of developers and consultants. It represented a level of responsibility that exceeded his wildest career expectations. But it also aligned perfectly with his growing passion for accessible technology. I'm honored by the offer, Marcus said carefully, but I have to ask, are you sure I'm ready for this kind of responsibility? I've been an intern for less than 2 months, and I've never managed a team or developed business strategies before. Mitchell appreciated the honest self-assessment. Leadership isn't just about experience, it's about character, vision, and the ability to inspire others to do their best work. You've demonstrated all of those qualities in the short time you've been here. More importantly, you have a genuine understanding of the market we want to serve and the passion to build something meaningful. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Mitchell outlining the support structure that would be available to help Marcus succeed in the expanded role. He would continue to work closely with Dr. Reyes on technical development, would have access to business mentoring from senior executives, and would be paired with an experienced project manager to help navigate the administrative aspects of leading a new division. I don't need an answer today, Mitchell said as the meeting concluded. This is a significant career decision that deserves careful consideration. Take the time you need to think about whether this opportunity aligns with your goals and whether you feel ready to take on the challenge. As Marcus left Mitchell's office, his mind was racing with possibilities and concerns. The opportunity represented everything he had hoped to achieve in his career: meaningful work, leadership responsibilities, and the chance to create positive social impact. However, the rapid pace of advancement also triggered his insecurities about whether he truly belonged in the corporate world. That evening, Marcus called his mother to discuss the opportunity. She listened patiently as he described the offer and his conflicted feelings about accepting such a significant role so early in his career. "Baby," she said in her wise, gentle way, "opportunity doesn't always come when we feel ready for it. Sometimes it comes when we're needed most. It sounds like they need someone who understands both the technical side and the human side of this work. That's exactly who you are." Her words resonated with Marcus throughout the weekend as he considered his decision. He realized that his hesitation wasn't really about his qualifications. His work had consistently demonstrated his technical competence and his ability to handle responsibility. His real concern was about the visibility and pressure that would come with a leadership role. On Monday morning, Marcus arrived at the office early and spent time reviewing his accomplishments over the past 2 months. The accessibility features he had developed were being used by thousands of users. His work with Dr. Foster had opened new business opportunities. The crisis response for Dr. Hendricks had influenced state-level policy decisions. Each project had built on the previous one, creating a pattern of increasing impact and responsibility. By mid-morning, Marcus had made his decision. He requested another meeting with Mitchell, not to negotiate terms or ask for more time, but to accept the opportunity with gratitude and determination. "I want to do this," Marcus told Mitchell when they met. "I believe in the mission. I'm excited about the challenge, and I'm ready to work hard to build something meaningful. I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm committed to growing into the role." Mitchell smiled, recognizing the quiet confidence that had impressed him from the beginning. "I'm glad to hear that. Welcome to the next phase of your career, Marcus. I think you're going to surprise yourself with what you can accomplish." As they shook hands, Marcus felt a profound shift in his sense of identity and purpose. He was no longer just an intern learning about corporate life. He was a leader preparing to build something that could impact thousands of lives. The reserved young man who had nervously walked through Pinnacle's doors just 2 months earlier was ready to step into a role that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his own potential.